as I said, our first method here is the simplest. It's what's called the plurality method, where the plurality method is decided by giving the thing, the person, the object, the place with the most votes, the victory. The one with the most wins. It's very, very simple. For those of you that don't know what the term plurality means, it refers to having the greatest number of votes, or what have you, in a situation where a majority is not necessarily present. So, for example, if there are 10 votes, one thing gets 4 and the other 2 get 3, the one with 4 is not a majority, but it is a plurality. And this type of system is something like what the United States uses for its elections, for its presidential elections in particular, up to a couple of adjustments for things like the Electoral College and the fact that there are only 2 viable political parties in America, where this type of system, it's good for the fact that it's relatively easy to administer and explain the results of. A lot of the issues with elections are logistical, that if you have a really complex ballot with a lot of options and it's not entirely clear how someone wins from that ballot, it can cause a lot of confusion. With the plurality method, no. And you might still need a lot of things on the ballot, but it ultimately comes down to who gets the most. It's very, very easy to understand. And for that matter, it sort of tends to narrow things down to fewer options by necessity, because the things with the most will tend to accumulate the sort of power, the sort of inertia to be remaining on ballots long term, and it tends to develop towards more centrist options, towards things that everybody is more or less happy with, but that no one maybe is ecstatic about. So, as a result, for better and worse, plurality systems tend to limit extremist voices, and margins of error tend not to matter very much. So between those two things, you end up with a lot of cases where the voters that you have their viewpoints can be kind of restricted to only very few meaningful options, and they can be pretty thoroughly disenfranchised by the fact that depending on where they live, depending on the circumstances of who and how they are voting, they don't really have any chance of getting their vote meaningfully heard. Because with only a few options, it's entirely likely that one candidate is almost guaranteed to win, so it doesn't really matter what they do if they don't like that one candidate. And in this case, we're going to talk about what would happen from a plurality method perspective with regards to that school trip vote. Paris would win. Because looking at that preference table again, we have that Paris got 14 first place votes. And in this scenario, we have 14 plus 10 plus 8 plus 4 plus 1, 37 ballots for the 37 students. There wasn't anyone that got a majority there. You'd need at least 19 for that, but 14 is the most out of our options, so that one would win. Maybe everybody wants Paris, but clearly in this case, a lot of people aren't too jazzed about it. In any case, that's the plurality method. It's very easy to do, very easy to tell who wins, maybe not the most satisfying, and certainly a fair bit limiting. So our next method that we'll look at is one that maybe is a bit more balanced, maybe allows for some more variety, but is also a little bit harder to track around, where this is what's called the Borda count method.